All right, let me see if my audio is working. Beacon anime thoughts, come forth weaponry. Well, don't worry, it'll be soon. But I just want to make sure everything is all right. And I think so. Let me add Freeman to the stream. But before anything else, I should probably just say this. I have barely been checking my phone today. I've been basically trying to I got the high power working just right. I did manage to break my FGC9 upper. That was fun. I broke a tap screw inside there, or tap drill. Really upset about that. But yeah, I haven't been paying attention too much. So if anything, we're just going to be talking more about the development like I was planning on doing. But another thing too, just to get this out of the way, because I know it's going to keep coming up. This is not the same. This is not FDMA, right?
Nope, I am not that guy.
Yeah, I made sure to put that in the title because I just didn't. I knew that was going to be something like I've made the mistake myself too. So I at least wanted to get that one out of the way. But you are not FDMA, just to make sure we can just have that again.
Oh yes, very clear. Although I'm very flattered when people make that mistake, but nope, not him.
Yeah, no, you have Gordon Freeman as your picture, so I guess I can see now. I have an idea where Freeman comes from, but or was it something else?
Nah, it's mostly that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. I also see we have Vin, P80 Ralph, and Triple F Technology. All right, well, this is great. I think
Nice.
so. Do you want to announce it first? You want to show a picture?
Yeah, sure. Let me get my screen share going here.
All right, I guess this will. I'll let the reveal come right now. I won't be the first one to say it. But for a lot of you guys who are, well, I'll just let you show it first because I feel like it's more fun to blue ball everyone.
Yeah.
But how's your day been so far?
This.
Oh, well, yes, here we got it ready.
Interesting day, but
ready for me to share it yet, or?
I'm just opening the picture. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna add your picture to stream now. You're at the desk. Or I see you're a Linux man here.
Yeah, I damn Linux. Here, I'll fix that 1 sec.
But I think people could have probably guessed it in a second.
They could.
It's a 1911. That's what it is. It's a 1911. So that's
indeed.
I'll say this to you because the immediate thing everyone said about the 3011, that was the one comment I kept getting on any of the videos I kept posting was specifically, can you make a less stupid one? In which, first off, I'm not a developer, so that wrong guy to ask for that one. And I figured probably, but I'd always just assumed it was too hard to do because, I mean, there was one guy a year ago. It was some random dude. I don't think he was even affiliated with any groups. It was like he just posted an image of he had a website of a 1911 like 3D printed frame. He had rails sold, like selling rails too, and then just disappeared, just gone. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't. I just assumed after that it was just too hard to do. Like if someone like I was interested in it, I would have totally loved to build that. In fact, I was wanting to. Then I think I kept trying to I don't know if his account still even exists or not. So it was difficult. But unless I'm going crazy at this point, that's what I feel like. But I'm glad to see that someone was glad to see that you're able to do it. So do you want to talk about the beta process a little bit, or at least what you want to? I'll let you leak whatever information you want to leak. So I don't want to be the one to screw up.
So I hope the screen share is still working there. I'll talk a little bit about the beta process just generally, but I'm sure people are wondering sort of where it started and where it ended up. This is the only slide off picture I'm going to be sharing here, just because I like to leave some secrets for now. But this was the original, the first one that I ever fired. This one has about 100 rounds through it after the picture. As you can see, integrated rails, and it actually worked really, really well. It hasn't actually failed, and I could keep shooting it. But from a long-term durability perspective, the thing that I worry about with a printed 1911 is that if the disconnector, for some reason, like if the back of the rails is allowed to wear down too much and the slide can go too high, you can get into an unintentional situation where you're letting off, basically dumping a whole magazine. And then, as much as I would like to call that a feature, that's not exactly something that I want people shooting unless they're absolutely ready for it. So that's part of the reason why I moved away from this.
I mean, what do you mean? A full-on 1911 sounds like a wonderful idea. That sounds very pleasant.
Oh, I do too. I mean, if there was some sort of a selector switch or a way to control it with the trigger, but
Yeah, no, yeah, it's. I know exactly. I get the same thing whenever I tell people I keep are getting like random binaries. It's just, yeah, it's fun when you actually want it to happen. It's not fun when you don't want it to happen, though.
Oh no, it is not fun. And honestly, just getting to this point took me. Actually, let me think about this. So I actually started developing this frame back in October. So I'm sure everyone's aware of Everytown stuff that I'm still sort of involved in. So I'm not going to really be speaking about that too much.
Yeah,
But just mostly that. Yeah, no, I was sort of depressed about all of that, as you can imagine, and sort of in a funk development wise, and this was sort of the thing that got me back, in my chair in Fusion, and trying to at least make this work. Along the way, I basically had to do a full redesign several times, which is part of the reason we're just seeing this now. Is that this is actually a pretty hard thing to be able to make it work without having something destructive happening or pinholes breaking and giving away, just because this was designed to be manually milled on a bridge port 100 years ago. Even in CNC, a lot of these dimensions are kind of hard to reproduce, and 3D printing makes it a lot easier, obviously, to just spit out a frame for it. But like I said, like 2 or 3 whole redevelopment cycles, and this is sort of where I started in terms of the first functional prototype. But it did take me a long time to even get to that point.
No, yeah. I mean, like the 3011, like did that help out at all? Like, because I mean that's already out, so I could talk about that one a little more because for the beta and everything.
Oh yeah. No, and that did help a bit. Just having that for reference on, just because at that point, I think it's not a secret that the 3011 testing was started for that on printed rails. So that gave me at least a little bit of hope that I could get at least a couple shots off to validate that the rest of the frame would hold together, and not have anything bad happen. I will say I never did strap this down to a lead sled. Every time I've shot one of these, I've shot it with my dominant hand, because if I don't think it's safe enough for me to shoot with my dominant hand, I'm not sending it to anyone else.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Say, I don't. I just don't have the range to do that, and then I always have to like play confident of like, oh no, no, I'm not gonna shoot a grenade here. Of course not. Of course, I believe it's gonna be fine. I trust I trust the developers. Like, just say a quick little prayer. The set me was definitely the first one. It's like, oh god, this is gonna be fun.
But, yeah, and trust though, that's exactly it. And that with this type of project being as difficult as it is to even get it sort of working, let alone make it reliable long term, I wanted to make sure that even with my beta testers, that I still maintain that trust that between sort of developers and the beta testers, developers in the community, just because trust is a very easy thing to lose. And I just wanted to make sure that I didn't inadvertently lose community faith, not just for me but for other devs sort of pushing the envelope, just because we do have a lot of that these days.
I was amazed with how well kept secret you were you kept this one down. But yeah, like it was for at least for 1911s. I'll just say this because I tried with my 1911 slide. My immediate thought was, oh well, I'll just build an 80%er. Dear Christ, if anyone has looked at a 1911 80%, like never actually looked at it, it is not easy to do. I think Stealth Arms, I'm trying to remember whichever one that does the jigs for those. They basically sold 2 jigs, one that was like the standard jig, and then one of the like, okay, this one for realsies, you'll do it like you won't mess up one, which was like $100 more, which was an immediate red flag to me. I was like, oh, that's shouldn't both of them just work well?
Like, I mean, because I'm no stranger to doing 80s. I've been doing 80s far longer than I have been 3D printing. but still, like the margin of error for a 1911 80%er is extremely high.
Yeah, and with I'm kind of curious to see how the Ghost Gunner does with that, because I mean that to me is a good enough like justification for that. If it could do a 1911 80%er, that'd be cool, but might
I
be a
mean, that's
little.
good, but even so, let's even take for example people who don't live in states where you can just freely have a magazine shipped to you. Let alone some of the jigs or 80% lowers and stuff. Like I'm not sure that if you were in a no-no state, as I like to call them, that they would even ship a Ghost Gunner to them.
I mean, well, we're already seeing it kind of now. I mean, look, if the ATF wants to find it, they'll find it. Like it's if you go in a bad state, they'll be able to find your 80%er. Like if they're willing.
Yeah.
I mean, with the 3D printed one, like the FRT stuff, like they're going through all the records and everything now. Like that's happening now to some extent. Well, I mean, the FRT basically destroys the record, so that's I guess good on them. But like with a 3D printed one, you just don't even have to worry about that paper trail.
Yeah, you know what though? I have mixed feelings about rare breed that sort of fall outside the scope of this video.
Yeah. We don't need to go into that.
No. The only thing I'm going to say on that is that kudos to them on having data security, so that they're automatically destroying customer records. I wish more people did that. I wish that was a default and not just sort of an exception that some people did every once in a while.
Yeah, because at least for because. Yeah, the 80% stuff. I mean, even if you can still do it, I just want that people. Like I see someone right now too. Is like, I'm glad I didn't buy a 1911 80%er. Yeah, no, I almost made the same mistake as you too. I looked at it and my immediate thought was, well, shit, this will cost even more than an actual just completed lower. Well, shit, I'll just buy one from Brand House then. Like that's just. It's just
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even like AR lowers, which seem to be a lot more popular to do 80% of, like you almost have to do like 10 or 20 of them in order to actually make it worth it. Yeah, just because let's say you get an easy jig like Gen 2 or Gen 3, which are arguably I think the easiest ones to use. You're going to be paying like what's the going rate on that? Like 300, 350 on that. Not to mention you have to keep buying end mills and drill bits as you wear those out. So it's not it's something that you have to sort of commit to unless you really only value your privacy to make like 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, I was contemplating doing one of the 3D printed versions, I guess, or 3D printed jigs. Apparently, Ivan did that, so that's Ivan's metal guns. But like, yeah, no, that to me that's kind of a thing I learned pretty quickly was 80% lowers. I mean, sure, yeah, I guess they're fine. It's just if you do to justify the purchases on those, you got to do a decent amount for the jigs. But
exactly, like I did enough. What was my number? I think on my Easy Jig Gen 2, I was able to get like 25, 26 lowers out of it before I finally wallered out the holes for the safety because it was walking a little bit, and then I had to get a new jig. But still, I don't call that a bad return on investment.
yeah, well, I guess to go back a little bit on the frame stuff. I saw we also had Vin here too at the beginning, but I know for Vin what he does is, which is amazing to hear, is like he just was able to just do frames without like the actual physical frame. Like, how did you basically? Where did you get your model from? How did you, or do you want to talk about that yet or not?
Sure. So some of that, for like, I wouldn't, I have gone through several, different, models. At least once once or twice, I did model the whole thing completely from scratch. I did take some from the 3011, just because there's a lot of dimensions there that have already been beta tested and proven. So especially dealing with things on wall thicknesses, I very carefully studied that model to give me an idea of basically what would work and what didn't. Although, looking at this, comparing that back to the 3011, you'll notice that if you use a 3011 front rail, that would literally go all the way through down to the bottom of the trigger guard.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that had to be done to actually cut rails in. The front and rear rails, did have to be. That was something that I did spend a lot of time on. Just because once you have 100 shots on a 3D printed 1911 with integrated rails, that's sort of the next thing is moving on to long-term durability and basically trying to get it to break. So I do have a nice picture of it breaking, assuming that's the next. Well, there we go. So it's actually kind of hard to see, but this is one of my intermediate sort of models. So you can tell I do have a front rail in there. I have a melted over pinhole there. right behind the stop, the slide stop. So I sort of took some cues from the high power as well, in terms of making sure things don't walk out. But if you look behind the hammer pin towards the left, very carefully, you'll see a hairline crack. So that was obviously telling me someplace where I had to reinforce, just because I was using that pin was getting slightly different forces because it's in plastic versus metal.
Yeah.
So basically just modifying the design as I went. To be able to figure out, exactly how I wanted to do things like cutting the rails in, but then making sure that it still, actually worked. So it's sort of a balancing act to, make sure the wall thicknesses, aren't, too thin, and still making sure that sort of cumulatively everything sort of works.
No, yeah, I mean, my immediate thought is you were clearly not using then our Polymaker's Polylite then, or PLA Polylite.
Oh no! I mean, so one of my design principles is that I want to make sure that my designs are buildable by someone with almost as cheap a filament as you can obtain that's PLA plus, and someone who doesn't have a perfectly configured printer. So unfortunately, this model is very delicate to print settings. So calibration and even tree support settings are very important to make sure it holds up long term. So this picture, which y'all may or may not have seen before, is this is one that I took actually, what was it? I think it was yesterday where I actually took this out and shot it. But the rails that are in this frame are printed, and I had about 200 rounds on them before I took it out yesterday. Now they have about 300, 350, something like that. Just because honestly, I've been putting so many rounds through those rails because they're sort of a pain to print, that I sort of lost track on the printed rails how long this particular set has lasted. But you can see some of the design changes I had to make along the way. Not sure if I showed this angle, but you can see I had to integrate the plunger tube, for the detents, just because you don't want the safety flying off into space, while you're shooting. Just a couple things like that. I did integrate the grips, just because it is sort of a lot of plastic, but I also have a pretty good handle on how to stipple things. So there will be a full stipple pack when this thing releases. I'll do some more basic stuff like the typical cross hatch you would see on just generic grips, and probably some more exotic stipples probably, but it is unfortunate I couldn't keep them removable. But for long-term durability, it was a design decision I had to make.
I mean, it's maybe someone can remix it when it comes out so I can put my sweetheart grips in it. But we got a couple quick questions. Hopefully, this won't derail it too much. But
yeah, sure.
By integrated rails, does he mean these are printed? I think. Well, they're both. All the rails are printed so far, right? It's just
so I'm working to have metal ones made currently. We're still working on that. I did have to do some redesign. So for no one who's people who haven't developed rail inserts before, there's a very fine line between what actually works, that you can print, and what actually works in terms of what can be made at scale with CNC. So it was humbling to go back and sort of see what part of this design is actually needed, what parts can I sort of do away with, what is the geometry that's most important that you need to preserve versus what can you get rid of to simplify the machining process. So at this point on this frame, all that work's been done. These rails are a little bit tricky to machine just because of the nature of some of the wall thicknesses being thin and not really being able to put pins where I want them. So it's sort of a compromise, in that regard. But what I've been testing most recently, they are 3D printed rails, but they are pinned in place, like you would expect, metal rails for a Glock or any of the FMDA frames would be.
Yeah, I also see someone had a question just for you. Or at Freeman, did you ever think to try what Hoff did for pins, bushing strengthening? I never heard of that, but
honestly, I'm not quite sure what that even means either. I mean, I don't watch as much of Hoffman's stuff as I'd really like to.
It's good stuff.
I think I'm gonna actually go figure out what the heck it is you're talking about. But that sounds interesting. I will say on this, I did have to sort of get creative. So if you don't have a good cheap soldering iron, go and get the $5 Harbor Freight one if you're in the U.S. Because there is a bit of plastic melting here that goes on just to reinforce things, especially that that big dump truck hanging off the back of the frame there,
Oh,
which
yeah.
some people may or may not like. Personally, I dig it. But.
I love it too. No, if only we could have Bulgan here too, he might appreciate it as well. But I respect that. Yeah, but yeah, if you want to, or Serenity, if you want to talk about that, then, or if you want to send me that, or like a DM or something, I could figure it out. But I think we both just kind of don't know. But yeah, no, melt. To be honest, if you don't have a soldering iron at this point now, it's like how I don't know how people could 3D print without a soldering iron. Dear God, that is
Oh no, they might make life easy, but sort of like if you're trying to stipple with a soldering iron, make sure you're doing it the first time on something that you don't mind destroying. Just because, I think what was it? I had at least one of these frames where I melted a little bit too far and ruined a pinhole that I couldn't fix later. But I did have another one where, what was it? I was trying to cut a custom pin, that I had sort of hammered in. I was thinking to myself, I can just cut it to length while it's in the frame. Guess what? The pin got so hot it deformed that pinhole under the spring tension because it was all together. And then it's like, hell, now I have to go spend another 20 hours reprinting it.
Yeah. For the FGC9 I've done, holy crap, I've learned, like, it is just, at some point when you're fixing with the soldering iron, you have to question whether or not you're actually, like, am I doing a better job, or should I just literally just reprint it at this point? Because I've been amazed with.
You'd be surprised what you can get away with soldering iron.
Well, yeah, no, it's the buffer tube in the FGC9 because it has the 4 screws in the back. And when I was trying to fix those areas, because of course, when you're heating it, of course they're going to move because they're hot. I had to. The sheer amount of trial and error that I had to do. I think I was heating the screws themselves and then using the buffer tube to basically space it perfectly. That was a pain. But yeah, no, I agree with you there. You can't be, if you're gonna practice that stuff, practice on like something that you already cut. If the thing's already basically ruined at that point, I mean, you can only hopefully fix it at that point.
Oh yeah, but that's part of the purpose of the beta. I do stupid shit so that you don't have to.
Yeah,
I can figure out some of these things so I can write them down. Although one of my design principles when I'm writing something like documentation, not to sound elitist, but I assume that either people don't necessarily know how to read. Basically, I write them for like a 5th or 6th grade reading level, just because I try not to assume that people can necessarily parse it, because I know for me, it's like if I download something that's new and cool and exotic, I'm not even going to necessarily want to read it short of print settings. So having lots of pictures to look at helps.
Yeah, no, that was when I'm working. I'm getting closer to finishing this Amigo Grande video. In fact, that's something that I know people are getting. I'm getting a little heat for myself as well. But yeah, I know I'm doing things. The Amigo Grande is one of the really good documentation. But holy crap, yeah, no, people need to read that before they get buy parts kits, because it is not an easy thing to. While the documentation is great, if you don't have the tooling and stuff, you're just not going to make it. You need.
No, exactly.
It's a lot of it's worked out. It's a fantastic done when you do it, but that's the thing I want to get hit very home with. That is just you read the documentation beforehand of anything, because it's really, really good. In fact, there's even videos too of how to do everything as well. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the beta process, if anything, because I think that's also a really fun thing to talk about as well, because definitely a thing that I don't think many people realize unless they've either been in a beta before, is that it's not an easy, or it's not like some betas take a lot longer than others because sometimes things just don't work. It's great when betas are announced immediately and then everything basically comes out fine. Usually, whenever it's public like this, whenever you're making an announcement like this, it usually means it's at a good enough point, or it's a good enough point where people are willing to try it, but it's still not done yet.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I'll talk a little bit about that just because. So I'll use the 1911 as an example. So, when I first started working on this, I had no idea if I could even actually make it work or survive just a couple of rounds. So at that point, I sort of avoided talking about it just because, I've seen what happens from past experience when I announce, let's say I have something that's basically ready for release and I'm doing a beta to sort of validate it with other people. I think the Woolly Bully is one example of that, which is the Taurus G3, which should be dropping sometime in the next month or two. I have another beta tester helping me, there to just finish validation. Or for the Fannyblaster was another one. But like if I announce the beta too early, like the price on those Taurus 709 kits for the Fannyblaster went from like $35 on Gunbroker all the way up to inside. I saw one go for like $300. So it does cause serious hype, but then you risk your beta testers not actually being able to get parts kits. And at that point, what's the point in trying to have a beta if no one can actually buy them and do the validation?
Yeah, no, that's. I wonder if Vin's still here for that, because we basically saw. That's basically the FNS stuff as well, to some extent. Was the beta came out, and then you want to keep it somewhat of a secret so everyone can try it, because those parts, when you announce things, I can only imagine what it must have been like to be able to, you worked on the Lopoint or V2, right? Like, high point power or high point parts kits used to be like $20 to $30, and that was like one of the staple guns of the 3D printed gun community, because of course, like, who wouldn't want to just build a pistol for $20 to $30? It's a steal. High point, not high power, high point parts kits now go. Like, you could find them on Gunbroker for like 150, which I'm not sure how many of you guys are high point connoisseurs, but high points go for about like 150. So
yeah, and I mean, before I did the V2, they did calm down a little bit. And I didn't make that one from scratch. That was Control Pew, I believe, was the one who made the Lopoint V1. All I did was, I wouldn't even necessarily say modernize it. Just going through it with a fine-tooth comb. And there was a lot of feedback from community members when I was still brand new to the community. Because so short story, when I took my first Lopoint that I made ever to shoot it the first time, a V1, before I even had Fusion installed or thought to learn CAD, I racked the slide, and I'm glad I was at the range, because I racked the slide, I let go, and it let a round off. I'm glad it didn't dump the whole magazine. But the fact is, if you don't have your print settings tuned in just right, stuff like that can happen. So that's part of the reason that I decided to go through it, and most of it at that point was just my printer not being really tuned up and being configured as well as it should have been. But I learned, but I also took the time to go through and clean up some of the dimensions. The first sketch I ever made in Fusion was actually me making that safety cutout in the Lopoint V2. So that took me about 3 hours to figure that out and sort of extrude it, and then do it again to adjust the position. But just slow iterative development to make improvements that made the Lopoint a little bit more friendly to newer printers, but more importantly, fix some of the issues that you would have if your printer wasn't well tuned. Like, there were some slide drag issues where it wouldn't cycle all the way and pick up another round, things like that.
That's what I loved about Spooky's Firebolt, is that there's also an entire calibration folder, which is really convenient. It's really it has basically all the pinholes, all the screw holes. You'll basically have make sure everything basically works ahead of time. Can you screw in the buffer tube? Fine. It basically is a good way to make sure, okay, if it's not working, did you at least try this before anything else? Did you at least, if you do this and it all works fine, then that means, okay, it should be good. But if you can't get this, if you can't get the calibration right, you're just not going to have a good time printing. Of course, you're going to have a lot of issues.
Oh yeah, no, I love that, and I mean, I may go back at some point with the Lopoint to. I didn't do a complete defeature of some things like the drop safety, because I'm thinking about going back and actually making it sort of part for part, not identical to necessarily a factory frame, but adding some of those safeties back in, just because they are some people's options, because like let's say they can't go out and buy something. You could still buy a high point parts kit for under $100 and put it together and at least have something in 9mm. So, why not make that a little bit safer? But, I might go and revisit that. I'm really not sure yet.
I mean, we have the Lopoint man, our Lopoint goat here. Maybe he probably wants you to do that, but what I'm hearing, Lopoint or parts kits are now back to 80, so that's more doable. Every time I want to build a Lopoint, I'm always reminded, I'm not spending. I'm not buying a high point for. I'm not
Yeah.
spending high point prices on a parts kit. Like I'll just go to the local Walmart and buy a high point myself. But
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I sort of use a low point as a litmus test for where the parts kit market is, just because, there are certain things that, will always go up or always go down, with the rest of those prices. So, and then, really depends on, who the person making the frame is. Like the Bobcat 21A. Like, I remember, what did I pay for mine? I got a fancy nickel kit with a couple of mags, and that was like 250, 300. And now even just a plain kit that's incomplete is going like for 3 or 4. So I don't know. It's just crazy, some of that inflation.
yeah, I mean, well, I guess another thing we could probably talk about too is I guess some people might also be interested in this as well. Is I mean, so parts kits, at least for 1911, something also a reason why I did like the 3011 to some extent a lot more. I like 1911s if you couldn't tell. I like Jericho's too,
Oh,
but
yeah.
1911s are amazing because I just like them. But compared to like your like your the FNS and then the other type of frames that we were kind of getting from like police buybacks or whatever. I don't really know what happened that made those parts kits go for like $100 or something like that. But those, I mean, that's kind of what it was. It was a finite supply. 1911s, on the other hand, though, they're not necessarily as popular as Glocks, but there is an aftermarket to 1911 stuff. Like,
Exactly. That's part of my motivation is that, if it costs $500 or $600 to just go build a cheap clock, I hesitate to say how cheap I got some of the 1911 parts kits for, because there were markets for them, and some of the parts kits providers that also do Glocks also did like 1911 builders kits, but they were also charging like $400, $500, $600, just for the frame, just for like the slide and parts, plus extra for the jigs. So there's really a wide spread on those parts right now, but the fact is, it's one of the most popular handguns in the last 100 years. So,
in competitive shooting too.
oh yeah, like 2011 race guns. I might have to go make a 2011. Yeah, once this is done and out. Just because one of the other challenges with 1911s is that it's not just the Lord's caliber. There's 9mm versions. Personally, I like 38 Super because I don't know, maybe that makes me more of a FUD. But that, and I also have parts kits and barrels to be able to not just test 10mm, but basically anything with a ramped barrel. I went back and redesigned the front rail specifically so that we could do on-ramped and ramped barrels. So that's sort of exciting, although I'm sort of wondering how well it holds up in 10mm, but I guess we'll just have to see.
Oh yeah, that would be a fun test. I don't have a 10mm kit, but if someone does, I guess you could, or just DM you for the beta stuff and get in, right?
Well, I'll say this: nobody makes a 10mm kit that I found that's actually affordable. I had to go through and basically buy the 45 compatible parts that would work in 10mm, and I pieced together a slide.
Did you see Ivan making, what is it? It's the it's 22 TCM, I want to say. He's making
Yeah.
he's shooting his 3011 with the 22 or the 22 TCM. Any possibility of that too?
Oh yeah, you should be able to just slap that slide on there, and it should just work.
That'd be
I
fun.
mean, you need the right mags, but yeah, I mean, and you can get those slides complete from Rock Island for like $300 to shoot in 22 TCM. So that should be an option. To be fair, I also need to make an on-ramped. I have to make a ramped barrel version of the frame too. Right now, I'm just focusing on some of the more universal issues. So, because if I can survive 1,000 rounds of 45 ACP, at that point, then I know the design is solid enough that I can go through and make the changes to, have the ramped barrel cuts in there, so that then I'm not having to. Just because source control on a model like this can get a little bit crazy if you have different variants. So developing one source model works, and then going back to sort of make it work with all of the other configurations is really the way I prefer to do it.
No, yeah, and I guess also if anyone has questions, by all means, be sure to ask. This is the best time to possibly ask if you want. But like, so another thing too is I've seen you also talk about this before, not necessarily about your project, but other projects. Is how different are 1911, or is it like, or how different is a 1911 like, or should pretty much any sort of standard 1911 slide work on this, or You're
So
not ready to talk about that yet.
generally, so I mean, from a parts compatibility standpoint, I mean, basically, if you can find, like an officer size or a commander size, those will work. The rails are pretty much universal to that GI spec, and they don't really change too much from 1911 to 1911. In terms of slide fitment onto the rails, but really where a lot of the other little changes are magwell length in some cases. Some of the pinhole locations on some kits can be a little bit different. So, to be fair though, that's something we're testing in the beta, just trying to get a bigger spectrum of kits to try to make sure that, because in some cases there was at least one pinhole, what was it, I think for the mainspring housing, that we had to, sort of, make it, not a circle to be able to accommodate multiple cuts. And we're sort of playing with that for durability, just because that's a really weak spot on the pistol, especially in plastic. So, just working on reinforcing that because, like I think I already mentioned it, but one of my goals, I want to try to get at least one of these frames to 1,000 rounds of 45, which it helps that I reload, so I can sort of keep those costs down a little bit. But I want to try to at least get to that point on a single frame without anything needing substantial repair or needing a reprint. But that's just one of my personal goals.
No, yeah, just need some of that Twitch money. Those Twitch subs money is great, but I mean, I'd love to help out as much as I can myself. I just need to fully assemble this frame now. Now that I have to reprint an entire new FGC to LB, I'll probably just work on this a bit. But that's. I do. Someone's also asking too. What's your opinion about the Digital Nimbus's roller delayed Glock chop slide parts kit? I saw that he destroyed a Glock slide.
I mean, yeah, I think everybody knows how I feel about Glocks at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. So yeah, even better.
I mean, that said, I'm all for innovation. It's not like it's not like he chopped up a high power. It's like if you were chopping up a Glock, especially if it was a rock slide. I don't think anyone's going to cry about that. But frankly, I think that roller delay stuff is an area where we can really innovate. Coming up. Because no gas system. I mean, there's some engineering challenges, but that's sort of the key to getting more rifle caliber things and things that have higher pressures. So proving them out with smaller calibers make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, the set me itself is also a roller delay too. So yeah, like it's one of those things. I think I even saw him kind of respond to someone that said, "Why?" Well, it's if it does work, it would be a really, really, really big deal. I'm not sure if there are any other like fully DIY delay systems. I think there's the flywheel one, that
that 4570 Fox. I love that thing.
Yeah, no, the Evan Jones one, which you look at that and you tell me whether or not you want to put that in the Glock slide. It's a much smaller and it's a much more doable thing, and it can easily, or if it works, it could probably be incorporated to other things. I don't see why not. But I also see someone. This is more of, I guess, an actual. I mean, unless you want to add something to that too. I would probably, as a developer, something you probably hear a lot too is, why develop this?
Well, I mean, part of it is because I can. Part of it is because I was told when I first got into the 3D printing community that it couldn't be done. So I think that's sort of just an aspect of human nature, trying to push the envelope and do things that you're not quite sure can actually work. But I'll be honest. Part of it is selfishness. I wanted a bunch of cheap 1911s just to keep around, and there was no way for me to do that cheaply. So I figured, if no one else in the community is going to try to figure this out, and because I love the 3011, but it's not the most compact form factor that I like. So if anyone's going to do this, why not me?
I mean, that's a more than acceptable response to that. I see one here. Will some basic 1911 building info, like hand fitting tips, be put in the documentation?
I think anyone who knows my documentation from my past releases already knows the answer to that question.
I'm assuming yes, but
yes,
don't worry.
That will be covered. We already have a going README as part of the beta. I'm trying to write my documentation as we go through the beta. So basically, I have a bunch of videos which I'm probably going to mirror to Odyssey in case YouTube decides to remove them. But basically, for certain assembly parts, troubleshooting, things like putting the slide together, just because if you have a Sarco kit, you probably realize that the upper is completely stripped and you have to press the barrel pin in. So those are all things I'm covering.
Oh, really?
Really.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, mine was already pressed. Thank God.
Just go get a vise. Yeah, you don't need a hydraulic press. I got away with a vise, and I didn't have to Dremel it to get it started.
Yeah, that would have been. Yeah, the barrel link would. That's kind of annoying. And then I see someone also mentioning here, can 80s can be, or yeah, well, I guess they're basically asking, are the frame series 700 or 70 or 80?
Oh, so they're basically 70 series frames, but the good news, we actually came across this. You'll see Dr. Death in the chat. Great guy. He's the beta manager over at the Turin Suspense, but he actually got a Series 80 kit unintentionally, and he put a lot of work into figuring out and doing the research to say, oh yeah, just leave all the Series 80 parts out, and assemble it as you would, and you're generally fine. Just because, like, let's say you had a Series 80, frame, you would usually have to put a spacer in there to try to make up the room. But with this frame, all that means is that there's a slight extra gap at the back of the slide. The actual Series 80 parts for the firing pin safety, if you know what a high power looks like, it basically looks like what they did on the high power, sort of like backported to a 1911. But just leave those parts out and you'd be fine.
No, yeah, I mean, something that was something that I had to learn too, which I was wanting to do that for the 3011 was just getting or something about the fitting stuff too. I had a the firing pin for mine was like, I think it was a 32 super. What's the, yeah, you said it too, was the weird
38 super it's sort of the one that's like between 357 Magnum and 38 Special.
Yeah, so the firing pin hole I think is different for that one. And
slightly. I mean, basically with that, you would use, if you want to build one in 38 super, use a 9mm slide, and it's basically just a barrel swap. That's pretty simple. The part that's actually a little bit more complicated is if you're trying to build something in 40 or 10mm, you have to make sure that the breech face in the slide is wide enough to accommodate it. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. For that, I bought Rock Island slides that had a reverse plunger cut in it. And that's a whole other pain trying to source those parts that aren't just GI. But that's what I had to do to build those.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the slide I got, but essentially it was one of the higher end ones. It was used a 32 super or 32 super firing pin panel, and it was it wouldn't none of the firing pins I would have would work. So I think I had to get like a 9mm one. I had to pretty much then like attach it to a drill and then get some sandpaper and then just let it spin away until I can get the tolerances just right. That was a lot of fun. But
I mean, it is hand fitting, but it's not impossible. I mean, there's plenty of people in the Philippines that make bootleg 1911s from scratch in the middle of the jungle. If they can do that, most people can, do that sort of fitting in their garage just with hand tools.
A bit of me has to wonder too. This then, like, so if you're able to, if we can get this thing out quickly too, and if it's successes, people are building a lot more of them. Then, like, I wonder if other companies will start to consider building like a polymer 1911. Then, because I
think I'd seen at least one that looked like that. For the life of me, I don't remember who that was, like which company that put them out. But I have seen them that have sort of like clock-looking rails, but they're probably using like steel rails that are that's proprietary. The rails are probably very firmly fixed and can't be removed. So, I mean, there are some people doing it, but then you see some companies going in the opposite direction, like Rock Island making a steel Glock frame.
And that's cool just because the people that make the 1911s, how great is that they're going to make a steel clock frame? That's great. I love that.
Yeah. But like in practice for these though, because not everyone can afford to go out and buy like a whole 1911 slide, the good news is you can still go out and buy, well, I hesitate to say the price, but you can still fairly affordably go out and buy all of the internal lower parts for a 1911, whether you just go buy them individually or go buy a lower parts kit. One of my design goals was that I wanted people to be able to take a 1911 slide off of one they already own and be able to just slide that onto a built lower.
Yeah, that's my favorite part about the 3011 is essentially really all you need to do is kind of buy or if you wanted to buy a separate safety, and just all you would really need to do is then just get a AR-15 fire control group, and then just get the rails and just slide on the barrel, like slide on your slide or your 1911 slide from like your actual 1911, and you don't need to change anything up. That's just it.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh
such
yeah.
a
No,
clean thing.
exactly. It
And,
is.
like,
Yeah.
that's why I love the 3011 to some extent too. Is because I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to have the normal. I'm going to have the the printed 1911, and then the 3011 that I could just swap between slides. It's great. And
Oh yeah, because they're not really hard to take apart. I mean, they're a little bit more inconvenient if you don't have a full-length guide rod. Just because then, if you don't take the plunger out, like, funny story, when I was testing one of my beta frames for the 1911,
how
I
far did
was
it
trying
go?
to I sent it 50 yards down range, and it was black. So it took me and two other FUDs at the range looking for it, but we did eventually find it.
Yeah, no, my immediate when you were right when I heard you started that, like, I know what happened. That happened to me too. I think Ivan said specifically in the 3011 documentation, you should get it runs better with a full length guide rod. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll get one then, because that's just after I tried dealing with the not the half length one, I was like, this is not
But I
pleasant.
don't know, like, even full length guide rods though, like if you get something with a reverse plunger cut, where basically you need to have like a paper clip or a piece of wire to take the thing down to get the slide off without things going all over the place. Just because that sort of retains, you slide the slide back, shove the paper clip or whatever, and then you can take the whole thing down.
Oh, people are saying my audio isn't great. That's a shame. Let me see if I can fix that a little bit. Hopefully, I'm coming through okay. I'm not sure if that's.
Well, I can hear you okay.
Yeah, no, I hope everything's fine. I guess I'll have to talk a little bit louder then. Hopefully that's better. But yeah, no, at least for me, I'm really looking forward to it, if anything, just because of that. I guess anything else we should say about this before? I at least want to talk a little bit then about development too, just because, I mean, you're a developer, it's the perfect time, but we could at least get some of the 1911, or at least some of the beta stuff out of the way, because I don't know how many people want to listen for too long. I've gotten that.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we can always go. I have a bunch of other releases. We can always have another session where I go through more of those if people want to hear about it. But at least on the 1911, just some of the development processes. It's basically just going through, printing, see what breaks, and then if I get to a point where things aren't just breaking, if I treat them nicely, trying to just really beat on them and purposely trying to get them to break and see where they break. Just because this print does take a little bit of time, and it's not a tiny amount of filament. I think they come out to around 120, 140 grams filament. So I try to be respectful of my beta testers, print capacity, just because I know I only have one printer, and I'd be pissed if I had to print something and then someone else releases another frame before I even get a chance to assemble the current beta that I have. But basically just going out and beating on them, see if they break, and sort of revising from there, and making changes as I go. I still want it to look like a 1911, so I'm trying to make the changes slowly and only enough to be able to get the effect without going too overboard. But that said, I'm sure people want to see this thing in action.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me go pull that up too. That I guess if you stayed this long, then good for you. Let me pull this up
Yeah, they
as
deserve
well.
it at this point.
Yeah, you deserve it. Yeah, let me get this right, because okay, let me move this over to my second monitor, just because I don't want to show the full slide thing, but here we go. Let me do this. You guys are going to see some footage of it actually shooting. And what I respect of this too is this is part of the beta process. Sometimes, if this is the one I think it is.
Oh yeah, no, this was the one the footage I took the other day. This is rounds 50 through 100 of that particular session. But otherwise, I call it how to waste $80 in ammo in 10 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So this is a footage of, I guess. Here's footage, I guess, on YouTube that you could do, which is,
So you can see we have a failure to eject there. Sort of crappy ammo, so it's not unexpected.
You're shooting it also one-handed, it look like.
Well, I mean, Daddy has his limits. It's still a beta.
Your grip is unacceptable.
Oh yes.
Although the biggest crime you've done was you didn't turn it sideways.
Oh no, that's that's for the release video.
Oh, okay, good. Don't worry, I'll help you with that too if you want to.
Oh yeah, we need a ton of footage from our beta testers for that, which unfortunately it is going to be a closed beta, for now, but should only be a couple more months, maybe if that, before we release it.
Well, just look at this. Yeah, this is already a. All right.
So you can see the slide stopping exactly, catching up there. There's a little bit of geometry I've got to tweak, but it really is magazine dependent. The real show is about to happen though. The last round here, I think. Oh, there it is. So
I know that.
Yeah, that happens sometimes even on factory frames. I just have to tweak a little bit of geometry and that shouldn't happen anymore, but I felt like, just to be honest, I should leave that in there so that people understand beta is not early access. It is not necessarily even well refined. So this is literally part of the process.
Yeah, not to mention with some of the hand fitting stuff, it also just is. Oh God, the high power has been a lot of fun.
This doesn't take a whole ton of hand fitting. I mean, like, I was able to just basically take the frame and assemble it without having to file much.
Oh, there's two streams going on now. Fuck the grip safety. The grip safety is part of it.
Yeah, I like the grip safety. There you go. Yeah, luckily I was able to fix the mainspring housing, pin geometry to the point where, the pinhole no longer blows out, after like, 100 or 200 rounds. But keep in mind, I was just really beating on this thing. Like, most people outside of a self-defense situation aren't just going to take out a 1911 and blast 50 rounds through it like that. So I was purposely trying to beat on it to try to get that mainspring housing hole to break. Even in the end, though, it just sort of deformed a little at the bottom, and didn't actually break. So at least I call that progress. 100 rounds before it even starts to deform. That's pretty good.
So yeah, your audio is, I guess, coming a little more staticky. So that's a shame. Hopefully, I'm not sure if there's anything you might be able to do for this.
Yeah, here, maybe that's a little better.
Oh, sounds a little bit better. Yeah, hopefully that should fix that first. Yeah, I see something right here. Yeah, well, guys, wait a second. I want to make sure. Yeah, right now we're at 40. Just share with a couple people. Let's make sure we beat John Crump's live stream. Then we can beat him, guys. So right now they're at 42. I'm looking at my life. Oh, we're at 37. Well, that's a shame. Well, all right. Let me remove there. Wait, no. Let me remove this screen share. But make sure let's try to beat them now. It's because of Hoffman. Hoffman's just such a fun guy. But yeah, no. I will say, I mean, one of the things too, which I really do like that you showed some of the issues that you were having there too. I mean, this is what I mean. It's showing that this is a beta still. Like, it's not necessarily supposed to. I mean, that is incredible. I mean, you still did very well. It's just, what do you think? I mean, besides that, like, or what do you think is the timetable right now?
Timetable right now. Well, the next step is we need to get our rails. More info on who's going to be supplying those later. Although I am working to, I'm making sure that they will be available at a fairly decent price, just because I'm sure people are going to want to build a couple of these, even if they're using frames off their like factory pistols. But the next step in the next few weeks, I'll be getting some rail samples to do a little bit more testing with, and our beta testers need them as well. But frankly, I just need to get the round count up at this point. And like I said, just a matter of testing things till they break, evaluating how to fix them, and then trying to break it again. Like almost anything else outside of GunCAD. But one of my goals is to take one of my kits, basically just replace all the springs in it so that everything's nice and tight, and try to get 1,000 rounds through it. And if it can survive that, in my mind, it's good enough for release. I still want my own beta testers to validate that. But like, let's say if I can get it to the 500 round mark of just casually shooting it without problems, I would call 500 rounds good enough. But I want to be damn sure and try to get it up to 1,000 just to make sure that I'm giving people something that's durable. Because I mean, there's Well, like, what's a round count on a 3D printed Glock look like? I mean, some people only get 200-300 rounds out of those.
No, yeah, no, that's a. I mean, for me, I could think of a couple of things like that too. I mean, the high power frames. Well, that's more just me being a tard than anything else. But that is like, or at least for some of the frames, like a lot of the, like the AR stuff, I don't really care as much about getting a full like 500, 700, 800 round on that thing because I know for a fact it's an eight. The real thing that's going to be taking all the stress is going to be the upper. With a pistol frame, on the other hand, that is a. I'll say I think yeah no compared to the set me, I think the high power, which was the first like pistol I guess I shot. I mean the 3011 was technically that. Oh god, I think I have the video on this computer somewhere. But the first shot I took with the 3011 took me like 2 minutes to actually do because I was so damn terrified. I literally built it with like. I was like, all right, let me just throw this all together. Let me go find some random screws. I'm not even going to attach them properly. Like half of, like if you, I think some of the initial videos, like most of the ones I had, all the printed rail stuff too. So I didn't even know if those were going to work well. Like I had the printed rails. I had a bunch of just random like mislength like screws I shoved in there, and I was just going to go ahead shoot. I didn't even have sights. It's like this is, well, let's see if it works or not. I just have to know. And sure enough, it was it was a lot of fear, but like, yeah, it shot really well. And now,
well, I mean, it's sort of a stigma, like, for anything that isn't like a 9mm or even 40, there's not a lot of 3D printed 45s out there. I mean, the big point, which, shout out to AtMac for that, because he did that like back in 2020, and that might have been the first that I know of that's a 3D printed 45. But short of that, the 3011. But I don't know of anything else that's 3D printed in 45. Luckily for a 1911, though, if it fails, it should fail pretty safely because the majority of the lockup is, for a 1911 is in the slide and the barrel and those upper lugs. There is a little bit of lockup, in the bottom that happens. And, some crappier 1911s can do something known as riding the link where, they're not locking up properly on the bottom. But even then, like if it fails, you're more likely on a entirely 3D printed 1911 that doesn't even have cuts for external rails that are printed at different orientations. The most likely place for it to fail is for the layer lines on the rails to just sort of peel up. But even then, you still have a lot of plastic, with the slide stop retaining the barrel and the slide to the frame. So you shouldn't have to worry about a 1911 slide flying back and hitting you in the face, if it fails.
yeah,
But even then, for my release one, there's going to be, metal in it in the form of the rails, and those rails will be pinned in. So, it's, not just like a grenade or something. There's a lot of safety that I've tried to build in there as best I can.
well, I mean, yeah, me shooting the 40 high powers have been that to me has calmed me down a bit. Of okay, I see. Like for me, that was a scary thing. If I saw the points of contact, I'm like, okay, well, this is. I see Niven shoot this many times. I know for a fact it's gonna work. All right, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. Like for the high or the 30,
the 357 SIG, that was the one when I saw Ivan's video on that. I didn't know how well that would work, but that was really cool to see he was able to put a 357 SIG conversion barrel in there, and that the thing actually worked.
I see we also have Bulg in here. Do you still have the image of the yellow one? I want to show him the beaver tail. I feel like he'll appreciate that now that he's here.
Oh yeah, sure. Here, let me get that up.
Yeah. But it's I do agree that there is just not enough in 45, and that's also another cool part of it as well. I mean, I think 9mm, I guess, is also just easier to get for some people, and people just the stigma of I guess 45 AARP, like okay, haha, funny, but it's a fun caliber, right?
I mean, honestly, if they weren't so expensive, I saw what was it for like $1,200 or $1,500? There was a Deagle parts kit on EGP. I was very tempted to buy that and try to make that work, but who can buy parts kits for those?
No, yeah, the Jerichos. I think I saw a couple people trying that. That would be a fun thing. The baby well, you could probably do, but an actual. For me, the challenge would be the rails on that one because the rails are in the actual frame, like the full like outside. I don't know if you could do. Yeah. It'd be weird, but yeah, no, it's. I'm trying to think of anything else we should at least mention specifically about this frame before. I might as well just talk a little bit about just some development stuff.
Sure. I mean, really, the only other things to know is that I've integrated as much as I could, so unfortunately no removable grips, but for a lot of reasons, that's a good thing the more you take a look at this. But yeah, that whale tail on the back, that's worth it. Although,
Yeah.
once the frame is released, when you get a closer look at it, you'll actually see why that beaver tail is actually there. It does a lot to sort of hold the back together, so it is not only aesthetic, it is also functional in some ways.
But you won't get any slide bite, so that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, who wants? You already sort of have the beaver tail off the grip safety, so and that's another thing. Very before I even started working on aesthetics with this, making sure things like the grip safety actually works, that you don't have hammer follow, things like that. Like one kit I've been testing a lot with was a really clapped out Rock Island kit from a cut up pistol, and there was a ton of stuff I had to replace there. So like, it needed a replacement trigger. I needed a new disconnector because that had gotten worn down. New mainspring, new mainspring and mainspring housing spring, and the actual Sears like leaf spring also needed to be replaced and then adjusted. So it's like you're almost better off buying new parts sometimes with the amount of stuff that you have to go and replace anyway.
Yeah, and let me think of something else too, because I guess one thing we should probably too then mention at least is how, or if anyone does want to get into the closed beta, or so if they at least want to try, what would be the way of getting into it then? If someone wants to help, or a developer that really wants to try, how do they let you know what their ideas are or something? At least if anything that they could try to do.
Well, I'll tell you what not to do. Don't tag me in Twitter because frankly, it's hard enough to keep track of some of the trails, the comment trails to see what came from who. The best thing you can do if you want to get in touch with me, about ideas that you have or things that or feedback. Well, I try not to do DMs on Twitter too much just because that can get hard to manage. But get an account on a Rocket Chat. Yeah, get an account on a Rocket Chat and try to reach out to me there. That said, I am working with I'm working with some folks there to try to find better ways to get feedback to devs. One idea that we had was to basically have developer-specific rooms on Rocket Chat, just because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that happens once models are in the wild, and can be a little bit hard to actually get feedback back to the developer who can do something about it, because oftentimes people don't necessarily have the CAD skill yet to be able to do it themselves. So trying to find better mechanisms so that we can actually get that feedback and incorporate it. And even if us devs can't do it that originally did it, I want to see more people do better revisions or more improvements on other versions of frames, like the Lopoint 2.0. Coming out with basically iterative design where we keep improving on the good stuff that we have, in addition to coming up with new stuff that's nice and exciting. I will say, if any of you mad lads out there are interested in working on a 100% DIY 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and if you have ideas on how to do it, go join Rocket Chat, because we have been bouncing ideas back and forth for a while, and it's kind of a hard nut to crack. So anyone who's interested on trying to actually tackle that and come up with solutions, I think that's the next big thing we really have to work on as a community.
No, and I also kind of want to mention this too, because I saw someone also ask this too. I think earlier on the stream, a couple people asked this: are there going to be any stipples to this? We're going to get a Chairman One stipples? Well, the fun thing about it is when it released, or if you want to go ahead and answer this too, but I think I have a good idea what you'd probably say too.
Oh, you mean specifically for the 1911? Like, of course, I'm going to be stippling it. I'm trying to make stippling a more standard thing on all my releases. Just drop the stipple pack as part of the release. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing that. I'm just trying to make sure the function is there. Just because I'm sure people understand stippling. It can sometimes take a little bit of time, and then you basically have to cut a new STL if there's structural changes. So it's the sort of thing I try not to do until the design is completely locked in. Big thank you though to Chairman Juan though, who he didn't I wouldn't say he didn't teach me everything I know, just because for stippling it's actually a little bit complicated. It could be a whole other discussion on and of itself. But you have to basically find workflows that work for you, because if you're trying to come up with a workflow where you can actually wrap textures around other stuff, you're going to be using multiple CAD tools, and then the biggest challenge is figuring out, where do you want to put texture versus where do you not want texture. And you can't really do that easily just using Blender or Fusion or SolidWorks. Or I think Chairman uses Solid Edge, which is at least a couple $1,000s a month for a license for that. Although it is a really cool tool, but still, it's
you're a college
just,
kid. You should be able to probably get. You might be able to finesse it for free too, but if you're lucky.
Yeah. If you're a college kid, you can of course get those licenses for probably nothing.
Yeah, no, but yeah, actually, that's how I have my SolidWorks account, which is great. But yeah, I was going to at least say this too, because I mean, this was my also thing is, when it releases, anyone can put stipples on it too. If you want to do it, or you're going to put the step files too. I'm assuming, right?
Oh yeah, no, of course. The step files are going to be released. That said, I feel like licensing of Rails and things like that can sometimes get a little sticky. There is going to be a period of time where I'm going to be giving exclusivity to one rail maker. Just because there is a very substantial cost there to trying to be able to tool up and actually make rails at scale. So because of that, I'm still going to be releasing my step files, true to my word, because I know I give people crap about not being FOSS. But that said, those aren't going to be released with a license where people can just decide to commercially produce them. That said, if you have a 5-axis CNC at home and you want to make rails for yourself, I encourage people to do that if they have the capability, but I know I don't have a 5-axis CNC, so it's sort of a delicate line to walk.
No, yeah, that's. I think that's at least some. Or I know that's. I expected you to at least do. I think most of the deterrence suspense releases usually have step files on them, anyways. But that's the fun thing too. Is anyone can. Or the nice part about this stuff is people can always add to it more if they want, or if they could find a way to get it to work structurally better and can do something different when it comes out, then you can make your own RV too. That's the fun part about it. Is at least we can get one that works out. And then
no, for sure. I just ask that if people are going about remixing things that are particularly sensitive, to changes that affect the safety of the model, dear God, test it yourself, and getting off 5 or 10 rounds on something that you want other people to test isn't exactly that just says that it sort of barely holds together well enough. So if there's one thing I would emphasize is test your models. Because if you're not going to be testing your remixes before you send it to someone else, whether you do like a beta with deterrence dispensed or anyone really, make sure that you do the testing of your own hand, that people will feel good about actually testing your stuff. Otherwise, you're basically people are in some cases are risking their lives trying to test these things. So I think just having enough respect for the people we send the files to test them adequately, regardless of whether it's a release or some other org, or if you're just doing it on your own Odyssey account, put the work in, do it right, make something you can be proud of. But more importantly, don't ask someone else to risk their life just because you're too chicken to test one of your own designs.
Yeah, there's the old FOSS Cannon meme of every single thing on there is just not tested. It's there. You can people make a bunch of designs and always uploading things, but yeah, it's.
There's some devs that can't test their designs because maybe they live somewhere where they can't actually own firearms, or they're not in a position where they can right now. And that I understand. That's sort of the exception, not the rule. But if you live in a place where you can own firearms and it's a design that you want to make for yourself, don't expect other people to put that sweat equity and danger into testing if you don't want to do it yourself. Is my main point.
No, yeah, I completely. Yeah, that is. I mean, that's something that I kind of like to do too. I at least like to also test. That was originally what a lot of the stuff I was doing was the original FGC9 stuff. I didn't think it was. There was nothing around the time when that one came out. Like there was a couple of Jay Stark's interviews. Ivan, I don't even think I saw him have it was still Mark 1. There was one dude from Russia that had one with I think a crank or something, doing a bump fire stuff, and it was basically a couple. There wasn't much online. It's well, all right, well let me just test this out to see if it actually does work. And after 500 rounds, I'm okay, I could probably upload something like this and that. I bet someone interested.
Exactly, and I mean betas are mostly for testing at scale, just because I'm not saying I have the world's best tuned printer. Mine probably is just good enough for what I do. But like, doing something like a beta with more than one person, really gives you a chance to test across a spectrum of different, not just brands of printers, but different. Not all lenders are created equal. So just to be able to make sure that you're testing across different filaments, different print settings for what works well on some people's machines and not others, it just gives you the opportunity to see that. But I'll at least say my minimum. If I'm testing a frame for the first time, before I even ask someone about turning it into a beta, I try to get at least 100 rounds, if not 200, through it. I had at least 100 rounds through the 1911 anyway before I decided to start putting that into beta. And even then, the beta testers don't test every single model because you want to be respectful of their time and their filament. So I like to send changes when they're significant enough to matter. But that's just sort of my own style, and everyone else will have theirs. But that said, if somebody in the community, has something that they want to beta and they've never actually run one of these before, I'd be happy to, sort of help, mentor people as I'm able to, over at the Taurus dispense to do that. If it's something they're interested in, I just, I don't do the work for you. I can, just help answer questions and push things in the right direction. But, I'm trying to, help people learn how to do this too, because I've only really been printing, and designing since what was it, like October of 2020. Basically, pandemic happened, and it was sort of a pandemic hobby for me. And then I started designing. Like the Lopoint V2 was my first project, so I've just basically been going from there, learning what works and what doesn't work.
No, yeah, I mean, for me, that's something I when at least learning myself, because I was just so much more interested in just also doing the beta test. Is like, I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that a lot of the deterrent suspense ones. I can only speak for a lot of those ones. I like the betas I've been in. These are tested a lot. Like they usually, when they're in beta, chances are it's been tested enough where it's just not going to, or it should be safe enough for the people doing it. It's just, can we get the round counts? How repeatable can we make it? And yeah, like the Amigo Grande is one of the best examples of one that, like, just recently was like, I don't think I've ever seen such an active beta before, where there were just so many people just trying different things, so many different variations. Someone made a G3, for God's sakes. Like, there was, it's kind of incredible when you that, like, the amount of work that goes into like a release before it happens, which is like, maybe you had a little bit of experience with that too with one of your Taurus builds, right?
Oh yeah, no, a couple. I mean, like I said before, the parts kits on the Fannyblaster went up from like 35 per kit on Gunbroker to like 150, 200 when I first made that beta announcement. So, yeah, it can be kind of hard to get parts sometimes, but yeah, like if you're interested in running a beta and you don't want to just tell the world like immediately what you have, you just have to make sure your testers can go ahead and get all those parts so that you can actually have the resources to test it without people spending way more on parts kits than they really should. But yeah, no, I mean, happy to help mentor people in beta, running their betas as they can. That said, I'm not the only one. I know Gerald Katz over at the Taurus Suspense. He's running like 4 or 5 betas right now, and frankly, I don't know how he actually keeps on top of all of it. Between cutting different releases and testing. I know one of them's 25 ACP. Like, I know I can't find 25 ACP anywhere, but
yeah, I know that's a finding 32 ACP has already been a challenge. I would want to build a Scorpion at some point, but damn, those are so hard to get. But
yeah.
I mean, now that that was very wholesome of you. So what about the gripes? What makes you upset? What do you not like hearing as a developer?
I mean, what I don't really like is, I don't, just, contrary to popular belief, because some people like to think that I like to create drama, I really don't. I just, wish that, people could understand that it's possible that multiple people are working on the same ideas at the same time. We've seen it before. It happened with the Amigo Grande, two of the largest groups in GunCAD, both working towards the same end, with very different approaches. Or, yeah, so it's possible that people could be working on things in tandem, but have their reasons for not talking about it. Like, at least for the 1911, I'll give you an example. I started, in October last year. I saw what happened with my previous betas, and I didn't want parts kit availability to be a problem. So I held off as long as humanly possible, waited to assemble my beta team, and like literally I have people that just bought kits as of 3 or 4 days ago who were just able to get them. So as much as it sucks sitting on an announcement for something game changing like a 1911, I had to do that for a long time to ensure my testers could actually get the resources they wanted. And that may come as a surprise to some people that were just, because it's very easy to make an accusation that, you try to beat someone to the punch. But the reality is we're all working towards the same, goals and trying to boost the signal. So I think, just trying to not assume automatically the worst of human nature for the people that are trying to, do this development and put the work in.
Well, let me derail that for the grift real quick, but thank you, Summer Darkness 343 for testing. It's kind of hard right now with ammo prices being so high. Here, this should get you 10 rounds. Okay, let me go back. let me go back to that. Sorry for that. I had to do that. Yeah, no, I would say because it sounds like for most people that I know, I think I saw Ivan mention this earlier too. Is it's a lot of these designs. Ivan's one of the biggest ones too. Like half of the things you could probably shoot, even people that hate Ivan end up still using Ivan designs. Like it's pushing something on. It's not really I'm working against anyone. It's more of we're all kind of working for the same goal usually.
Yeah, because the fact is, government glowies don't care if you're with Aussie or they don't care if you're with the Turn Suspense. Fact is, there's so many groups that are, working against people being able to, take advantage of their rights, whether that's codified in some legal document or just, not. But, fact is, we're all working on the same team here, and I just wish that, people, I try not to be so negative myself, although that doesn't always happen. But, we're all working on the same team. So just because, some of us may surprise others with designs we're working on for reasons that, we have, it's like as a developer, you get to choose when you want to tell people that you're releasing a design or if at all. Just because why release, why would you release, plans that, oh, hey, I'm working on this, just to find out, oh, that doesn't work. So all the people that went out and bought parts kits, sorry.
The easy thing too is, for Amigo Grande, the set me stuff. The set. Has anyone seen a set me parts kit price? Those are cheap. It seems like it was bound to happen at some point.
The Spanish government, they cut up a lot of those. But I'll give you an example. Gerald Katz, for his 92, he decided that he wanted to keep that a private beta just because, 92 parts are not exactly as available as 1911 parts. So he made that choice so that his testers could actually go ahead and, get the parts that they needed. And some people, just trying to hedge that bet, went and bought Taurus, clones of the 92 parts kits. And then, we're very disappointed to find out how different those kits actually were from what the frame was actually designed to do. So, that's just one example. When you try to hedge the parts kits market, really easy to be burned.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it too. I think I saw you mention it. There's a bunch of also different types of 92 or Beretta 92. It's I did not realize how much variations there were between different of those slides. But
oh yeah,
that's also another thing you have to keep in mind too. Ivan's high power. Dear Christ, I do not know how many different high powers there are out there. But
yeah,
it's always a lot of fun. For me, the one thing I always usually hear, or I can at least usually see, is this one comes up a lot, and I guess maybe I'm wondering what you would respond, because this is, I guess, directed towards, I get mostly from, people from Europe. Why not make something that doesn't require parts kits? Why not do something like this? I feel like we kind of already talked about it, but I guess
yeah.
What do you see at least, with doing these frame builds, and if anything could be, I guess, applied to something else?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. If I had to boil it down to the simplest possible reason, the reason you don't see more from scratch builds, which is what I call things like the FGC 9, the Mod 9, King Cobra 9, whatever, that's hard. There's a lot more that goes into it. You're talking about literally building firearms compatible parts that can bear pressure from raw materials. So that takes a lot. That's a little bit different in design from using a parts kit. Just because if you have a parts kit, you sort of know what you're designing around, and it's very easy to do that. I know Vin does that. I know Gerald Katz does that. Personally, if I'm developing something, I generally already have a frame for it, so I can take measurements just as sort of a rough guide. But when you have to completely envision something from scratch, you basically have to have an idea of where you're going first before you even lay anything down sketch-wise and in Fusion. Just because um, you know if you don't know where you're going, it's kind of hard to figure out how to get there from a design perspective, and then things can change dramatically midway. There's a lot more cost. Your beta testers have to have the ability to make a lot of these components. Especially things like bolts and barrels, whether that's ECM or you're buying them over the counter. There's just a lot more that goes into it, and it just takes a lot more manpower, which is why you don't see things like you don't see a lot of from scratch builds that have a single name on it. Usually it's at least 2 developers or more for the amount of effort that goes into that. But yeah, I mean, that's my sort of shtick on it. Bottom line, it's extremely hard to do it. It takes a lot more, and it's not an easy win. I know, like if I want to, like if I'm trying to, do something in between projects, that's when I develop most of my accessories. Just because, I'll CAD up an accessory like the freeloader or something, if I'm trying to put off writing documentation for something bigger, which is sort of self-defeating because then you end up writing more documentation than you had to in the first place. But the fact is, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy to try to see that through all the way to the end to finally releasing it.
I mean, I'll just say it too for the FGC9, or like someone was joking about it. Yeah, it's been almost a year now since I've uploaded that like trailer. Oh, coming soon. Yeah, well, on the bright side of it, I've cataloged almost every single issue you could probably have. But like that's the thing though, is someone already kind of did that too. That was what they like. I'm not really doing anything too special, but like trying to do that without any sort of guide, without someone intentionally doing things wrong. I think I heard Ivan once mention it. I'm not sure if it was privately or on someone else's show. Was essentially too like he had to also screw up some chambers a bit, have to intentionally miss headspace things where it's not right. Like you not only do you have to get it to work, you also have to get it to not work, and then how you could fix it. Like it's one thing to, I guess, to show everything just right, but it's like for a fully DIY stuff, there are way more other variables to it. I get a lot of messages about the Mod 9 V2's documentation. It's some people get confused with it, and yeah, like it's
documentation. I didn't know it had documentation.
Well, it does. It's I know they've updated it, but it's like it's a read, or it's more of a README. I mean, if you built an FGC9, like a lot of it will basically transfer over. You'll kind of know what you're doing. But if you don't know, if you're coming from scratch, you have no idea if this is the first build you've ever done. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit. Or if you're doing the firing pin, like just getting the firing pin just right, without an extractor, that little bit of like just an extra couple millimeters won't let it eject. So you have to just tune it just right. And if you don't, yeah, you'll just keep having issues. And if you don't know how to fix it, you're just not going to fix it.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's much easier for me to say we should have some of these things, but like as part of a from scratch build, it would be really cool for future ones to see people. Well, I mean, I hope I can develop something like that going forward. But like developing things like go and no go gauges for things like firing pins that are actually accurate when you print them, to give you an idea of as if you've gone like too far or not far enough when you're trying to grind the profile on a firing pin, for example. But like the tools and the gauges are almost as important as the instructions, as the measurements of how they're supposed to look.
Yeah, I also see Doge now talking about. Yeah, there are build videos. That is true. I've seen those.
Nice.
It's a little bit older. It's a little bit depreciated. I think it was an older form too compared to. There's, I mean, with it fully DIY stuff, it is a lot of. Or I do like those. I think everyone usually could probably agree that it would be nice if we all just had like a nice DIYable, reliable like pistol, because then that would save. Like, I mean, I would totally care if that would have been like out when I started. I would totally build one of those first too, because why not? It seems like a fun thing to try out, and if it's a gun. If you don't have a gun, it's better than nothing, right?
Well, I mean, of course, you could say the same thing for like you could say that about a Lopoint. You could say that about a FGC9, Mod 9, or whatever pistol caliber carbine people want to print. But yeah, I mean, a gun is better than no gun. I mean, that said, a sneak peek into something I'm thinking about developing, and I'd love to hear, feedback back in the comments to see how useful it actually is. But like coming up with a release that basically, is a build guide for slamfire shotguns, but has stuff like, grips, possibly find a way to get an automatic extractor in there, basically find a way to take slamfire shotguns and not only make them safer, but document, how to, build them a little bit easier, just because it's the sort of thing you wouldn't use unless you had an absolute need and no other way. At least I wouldn't use a slamfire shotgun unless I had to. So that's something I'm tempted to do, to at least give people who aren't in the U.S. something they can build and have confidence in, that at least has a pistol grip and, a way to control it a little easier.
Well, have you heard of Jeff Rodriguez before?
Oh, I know he's doing the Liberator 12K. I mean, that's cool and fancy, but how many people can go out and build that today if they've never built a firearm before?
Oh no! Well, have you seen the Cafe 12 though? That's the one that he's trying to push out right now. It's not as yeah no. He was telling we've had him on stream too about it. Yeah, he was saying that the Liberator 12K, so that one's a pain to do. Yeah, he's like, yeah, it's not going to be easy. I don't think many people are going to be able to do that. But the Cafe 12, on the other hand, that one's just a break. It's just the break action. Like,
ooh, I haven't actually seen that yet. So yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look.
Yeah, no, because that was exactly what he was kind of saying too. Like, this one is something that he can do. In fact, he was actually talking to someone who literally, I found someone on Twitter that tried it, where they just did just the two pipes. They didn't even put anything on it, and they just slammed it and broke their arm for obvious reasons of, like, if you just do the calculations of the amount or how fast that thing, or if without like the rear counterweight to it, it's just, yeah, it's a stupid idea. You're going to, there's just so many things about slamfire shotguns. Like, well, yes, they're fantastic for gun buybacks for that exact reason, that they're kind of just cheap, and if you're not going to shoot it, you don't have to worry about this stuff, but it will shoot. Like, getting it reliable to the point where you don't, break your arm or blow up something, that's a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean, therein lies the challenge.
And yeah, that's why I really do like the Cafe 12. I'm hoping to eventually, once I finish up the set me video, I guess now oh god, yeah, the FGC 9 video will be a little bit delayed, but I'm also now working on the Cobra 9 stuff, so that'll be fun. That's something I do want to talk about, at least definitely make a video on, just because that one, yeah, you didn't even hear about it either, because it's one of those things where, yeah, it's an obvious thing. Like, you just make we have the cool Liberator 12K. It's really cool looking, but it's very hard to build. The Cafe 12, on the other hand, is really a lot more easier. And I think Jeff you could buy his own kit, and then he also has a way of doing it with your own tubing if you want, which that's going to be the hard parts, the tubing and other stuff. But he's done a lot of testing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really want to take a look at that now, just because shotgun shells seem to be a lot easier to find than pistol ammunition in a lot of parts of the world. So, yeah, that has a lot of potential. And I know for our US-based, friends that are on the chat, I do know that we have some devs, don't want to say who or exactly what the parts kits are, because I don't want them to mysteriously go up in price overnight. But there are people that are taking a look at doing some things with shotgun kits.
Yeah, I got a Mossberg 500 parts, or like frame, laying around. Someone just gave it to me, and now I understand why. There's like getting the parts kits for those are almost about as much as getting an actual 500.
I mean, the problem is it's the damn boomers on Gunbroker. They'll if
I know what I got.
Well, oh yeah, but like if they need like an individual pin or spring, it seems like their methodology is like, well, you know what? It's better for me to just buy a full parts kit, and this way I'll have the parts when I need them instead of having to pay $20 for a spring.
Well, yeah, that's real. God, yeah, that's such an annoying thing too. Yeah, one of the other fun thing, a fun thing about our shotguns as well, the DIY shotguns. I didn't realize it too, but yeah, Jeff was explaining to me was the safest way that people were doing or extracting was just, I think you said the most reliable extractor someone had was basically you turn the barrel around, then you just load another shell in and fire with the bore obstruction.
Oh God.
Which, I mean, if it works, right? But like, yeah, he was like, yeah.
At that point, it may not even be like a firearm at that point. It's almost like a signal launcher.
Yeah, no, that was I don't think that's the Cafe 12, but that was like, I think the the biggest advancement that someone had beforehand. So yeah, no, like it's the nice thing about a lot of these other designs, which I guess I'll tie it to this because this is kind of the one thing I wanted to do is, the pistol frames and all these other things like the Amigo Grande, while it's not, if you don't have a parts kit, you don't live in the U.S., it's going to be, you're probably not going to make it. But the information that we learn from it, it's still valuable, if anything. Like you can easily move this or transfer some of the stuff over. Like someone was talking about, or Digital Nimbus's roller delayed Glock. Like that would be massive if that actually, if he can get that to work just right. Because
Well, yeah, because really the hardest part of doing something roller delayed, especially because the SETME, there's a trunnion there, and the trunnion is very carefully engineered for those internal characteristics that make it possible to do roller delay. Of course, you have bushings and other things that have to be adjusted for head spacing in some cases, but the fact is, trying to build all of that, out of plastic, I'm not sure an entirely plastic roller delay blowback would be possible for a bigger caliber, but at least proving out the techniques for making them at home, even if they're not entirely printed, that's something that can scale up, and that's how you get something like, I don't know, it would be kind of cool to see like, something that's a completely DIY, 308 or 762 by 51 NATO. That
and then
would be really cool, but
and we also have ECM too, which we can make is an easier process. That's the whole conversation we had with Jeff too, is using ECM. You don't necessarily have to make it all printed, but if the tools are easy to make, and then you can now do things easier. Well, then great. Yeah, now you can do metal where you can make metal where metal's needed, and it doesn't. I don't think anyone really is that desperate for fully 3D printed something. Like, I don't know how many people are clamoring to build, like Liberators and Songbirds, I guess. But
yeah. But I mean, that said, like for some of these designs, having some of these designs made in mind that some people in certain restricted countries might have access to things like CNC, but not necessarily plastic. Like on YouTube, I sort of like watching videos of people in India and Pakistan, like repairing things like these huge like 12-ton truck axles, and like making gears out of like ship plating from ships that are broken apart. Like if they can do that with clapped out tools that are way past their service life, I feel like we have fewer excuses.
yeah, that's what I love about Jeff's thought process too. Because like that was his whole thing was, all right, how can I use 3D printing to make a Slamfire shotgun better? He's gonna put metal. He's like, I'm gonna put metal where it's needed, and then just make the other parts just with or that I can't 3D print, like 3D print. Like I think he had to use a custom like metal backplate, so that way you don't have the whole problem of exploding on you. So like it's things like that where you do what you can, and then 3D. What we do is I guess 3D printed, but it should at least it doesn't have to just be 3D printed to be 3D printed. If you can make it like if we could make a full flat out of just ECM like metal, like sheet metal, then that would be huge. Like I don't think people would complain about that. Like that would
And
be
like
awesome.
use the right tool for the job. I mean, like 3D printing can do a whole lot more than just frames. Like you can use 3D printing to make jigs, even if they're one time to use only. Like I know in the reloading scene, like one big thing that a lot of people print is sort of their gateway to 3D printing is making a 300 blackout jig for like a Harbor Freight mini saw, so that you can cut the necks off of 5.56 cases to reform them to 300 blackout. And a lot of people get started doing stuff like that, but like apply it to what we do. Like you're tired of paying like $5 or $10 for a Glock magazine catch spring. Great, go get some of the right diameter music wire, make a jig, and then you can start accurately cutting them off. And you could even sell them if you want to, but boom, you no longer have to spend $10 on a single straight piece of wire.
Yeah, I need a or someone's talking about it too. Zurad has been working on cutting steel flats with ECM. Yeah, no, he was on with the Jeff show. Yeah, I mean, I gotta catch up on what he's been doing. I've been hella busy as of late. But yeah, no, I mean, that's something that I think it's one of those things where I feel like people that just aren't I don't know the right way to describe it. I guess people that are just getting into it that don't usually know anything are immediately, I guess, don't understand. The one thing I usually get comments would always be like, oh, why isn't someone made a fully 3D printed, rifle, fully 3D printed something? Like it's always, yeah, it's hard. I guess people don't understand what they're doing or exactly what it is. I guess what goes in development, how things work exactly.
Well, yeah, and certain people, don't make it easier. Like a certain
Oh,
influencer who likes AKs that 3D printed something that they knew would blow up, prior to testing, something like the Plastikov. Those types of things don't really do us any favors.
there's a chance I will bite my tongue. What is someone saying? Is it YB precision casting with lost PLA? You can make well, yeah, that's something too that I guess we could probably look into as well. Someone was telling me they were going to try to make a lost PLA or lost casted PLA Glock slide or Glock frame,
Well,
which
I
would
will
help with.
say I've never actually tried lost PLA casting. That said, the shit's hard enough to try to do it just the old-fashioned way with wax. So it's like someone who tells me that precision casting with lost PLA is easy as someone who's never tried to cast before is what my gut tells me. Although if I'm wrong, please correct me. But I'm just saying it's harder than lost wax casting from what I understand. And the fact is, you're still heating metal up to a degree that could basically you could risk losing body parts. So I mean, some people may not be tempted to try that, but like I don't know. There's a lot of easier ways to get a Glock slide than that.
I mean, I think there was more useful things that would be like helpful, like working on annealing. I'm not sure if you saw some of the P80 Ralph did was pretty cool. He did a annealing test with Glock slides, and he was able to easily get 200 rounds without any sort of deforming because PLA is a very good material. The issue is not getting it to deform. I was trying to get a Mac Daddy frame annealed, and just because it's so massive, it was getting that fully tuned just right to work like that was just a pain. But there are things specifically that to me I think would be people really don't understand. I guess really underestimate how strong PLA is and other filaments. It's PLA's big problem is it melts easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, then there's getting into higher temp stuff, like trying to do nylon or something that's glass, yeah, glass reinforced. But I don't know. I mean, every material has its limitations, and you just have to know the material to know sort of how it behaves when you try to do certain things to them. Like PLA having, I feel like some of the polymaker stuff has just generally been more durable than
Oh
just
God.
using some of the other types of PLA that I've used. So, I mean, I won't necessarily say what brand and type that I always use, just because it's still cheap and I want to keep it that way. But yeah, I prototype with the cheap stuff and I test with the cheap stuff. If I want to make something that's a little more durable, I'll generally use Polymaker, just because Daddy here ain't rich, so it's like a spool of filament's still a spool of filament.
I mean, I think I have a link in the chat too, but yeah, no, was it the Poly Max? I was using that recently. Holy fucking crap, that shit is so damn it's a weird. So the Poly Max PLA is different, but it doesn't break easy. It's much more, I guess. It bends a little more. It's not nearly as stiff, I guess, as their PLA Pro, whichever one that is. But
yeah, I noticed it can take more before it actually snaps, and
yeah,
I don't know. It's just, yeah.
I was trying to break off the supports. I remember because I was trying to melt in. I printed it with the high power frame, in which, oh my god, the Delta printer I printed it in horribly under extruded it. It was terribly under extruded. But that thing has such good layer adhesion. It is not a problem, not a problem at all. Which
Oh
is
yeah, but I mean, even within certain types of PLA, I'm finding some of them require slight adjustments to, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say like tuning E steps for different types of PLA plus, but definitely there's a lot to be said to making small changes depending on brand and type of filament you're using. Like I found I could get a slightly better performance out of some of the Polymax by tuning some of my print settings if I'm specifically going to be printing it out of that material versus just a more generic PLA plus.
no, yeah, that's something. That's another thing. That's a whole nother animal too. Getting everything tuned just right for that was the thing I kept running into with the annealing stuff. I wanted to make a quick video on basically how can you, I guess, anneal non-HTPL. It's like the protopasta stuff that Ralph was using is expensive, but it does work really, really well. Like, I'm not gonna. It doesn't warp that much, and God, yeah, it's way more easier than using like your typical PLA or PLA plus, and then hoping to God that you're able to kind of account for it. But
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't messed as much around with annealing as I'd sort of like to, but
it's
I don't know.
yeah.
Frankly, I haven't run into situations where I've really needed to anneal things. I mean, even with the 1911, which the name of that frame I picked for that one is the OK Boomer, so I'll just call it that. So, like with the Boomer, I haven't really gotten into a place where I really need to anneal anything. I mean, that said, you can fuse layer lines very effectively with a soldering iron if you're careful, though that also requires a little bit of skill. But, I haven't gotten to a point where I necessarily need to anneal anything. Like even the 3D printed rails I was testing in this, test video y'all saw, those rails now have 300 rounds on them and they're still perfectly usable. I took it apart. There was no damage I could see. So metal rails will make me feel a little bit better, but I haven't had a single failure of the 3D printed rail inserts that I've been testing with yet. Even though they're not really advantageously designed, like there's some thin spots, but I still haven't had any 3D printed rails on that fail on me, even getting to extended round counts.
I mean, for me, the one thing I wanted to try was specifically for the Amigo Grande. You have to use a printed trunnion, use a printed like retainer for the trunnion. And now I think Ivan says you can use, what is it, RV gasket glue or whatever it is, to pretty much extend or make that thing not basically heat up instantly and open up all your groups. But like that like I'm wondering if I were to just to anneal that type of, because it's not the biggest part in the world. That would, if that thing can handle heat, then well, then that would be a big deal, because then you wouldn't. I'm
Yeah.
using currently ASA, which I, in all honesty, kind of fixes also the same problem, really.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm a firm believer in using the right tool for the job. I mean, filament included. That would be something though, like for something that requires higher temperatures, using like HDPLA or something specifically for that part of the Amigo Grande, and then saving some of the other more affordable PLA pluses that have a lower melting point for other parts that don't get as hot. So I mean, then again, though, if you
Yeah,
have different printers configured differently for it,
yeah,
you can sometimes run into problems with stuff not fitting together if they're made on different printers, which would be a concern. But
yeah. That was Ivan's thing. Was, yeah, he used the RV gasket stuff, which kind of fixes the problem for, fixes it for him at least. Where yeah, it basically keeps, I guess it's a thermal insulator where it doesn't really allow the heat to transfer to the PLA as much. So it's able to, I guess, keep the PLA is able to not melt or just deform as much when you're shooting it, which that's, I mean, ASA I guess kind of also just does it, but that's something that I've just been working on that video so much that I've been kind of that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Yeah, but
yeah,
let me, like, I guess let me think of anything else we can at least mention. I see RK Spookwares in the chat, and we'll have another stream later today as well, another action-packed one. JSD will be there, so it'll be fun. If you want to come up with anything fun to say to them, that'll be great. But
well,
I'm
I know.
joking. I'm joking.
I'm just saying, we're all on the same team here. I know some of us have very different opinions of what that means to be on the same side, but I just, I try not to undermine anyone, and I just try to, help people. I mean, trying to do something to purposely undermine anyone is just as a bad look anyway. So, considering we're all sort of fighting against the same people here.
Yeah, no, let's be honest, like that's a fun little thing too. I mean, we're talking about rare breed stuff as well. I mean, I noticed the kind, the most recent video, he was basically coming out and saying, yeah, we should all basically, right now unite to fight against, the ATF. We all pretty much hate the ATF, right? Well, it's not right. It's true, I guess. Yeah, we all have the same common enemy. Let's be honest. Moms demand all of them basically hate us anyways. Like that's a common. Or they do not like what we do. We should basically just keep focusing on undermining them, because I think we all just hate them, right? They're just unlikely people.
I mean, even some groups like that, with Moms Demand, if it wasn't, firearms, it would be something else that they find undesirable in society. Let's be real. It's not just about, 3D printed guns. It's about, a group of people, not liking people expressing their rights and being able to take care of themselves is really what it amounts to.
Well, I mean, here's another fun thing for you too: is what, because I saw, what is it? Invader's Zip has his own. He basically says my printed guns are range toys. You're kind of also implying that not really necessarily for you. You don't see them as range toys.
I mean, that must be nice to have the privilege where you live in a place where they can be a range toy for you. When I do my designs, I know some people, would never EDC if something 3D printed. The reality is that implies a certain amount of privilege that you don't need to do that. There's a lot of people that are in a position where they, it's their only option. So you should be designing, with that in mind, not just thinking, oh, well, it's a range toy, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I'll say this right now. I have nothing against Invader Zip. I like the arc a lot, actually. I'm just saying, it's a different. I mean, each developer has their own different idea of what they're developing for. It's something. That's something I really do like too with the FG. Like, I mean, my original gun is an FGC9 of all things. So, like, for me, I mean, I guess, now that I have a couple metal guns now, I have my AR and my Jericho, which is it's now it's kind of has a nice little bit of being a range toy now, which is, I guess, a little more comforting to some extent, because getting everything tuned just right is kind of annoying. But I know for a fact I was treating it like, the reason why I put so many rounds through it was because I knew I was gonna, if the time came to it, I was gonna probably have to rely on that. So,
oh yeah.
And I guess I mean, I think that's probably why you do all the Taurus frames as well, right? The cheap ones that anyone can get.
Yeah, I'll talk about that for a second. So, like, the reason I even, approached doing the Taurus frames at all was, besides the fact that I like the idea that it was something Glock-like without the Glock price tag. I mean, the prices have, gone up a little bit, but they're still cheaper, at least half the price usually of building a Glock. Even though they have proprietary mags, it's whatever. But, for some people, that may be one of their only options for self-defense, especially if you live in one of the no-no states, if you're in the U.S., where you can get those parts kits. Maybe you live in a state that requires a lot to be able to get a CCW legally, or just may issue and just chooses not to issue them. Or maybe you live in a place where firearms are expensive, but you can still buy the kits unregulated. There's a lot of reasons why people wouldn't be able to afford to just go out and buy a Glock or build a Glock. So, traditionally we have a lot of frames so that they're smooth-sided, or they have some stuff to help enhance the grip. But we have a lot of people who like their Glocks. So part of the reason I even learned how to do the stippling in the first place, which that it took me at least a couple of weeks to try to figure out a workflow where I could kind of get the stippling where I wanted it. But the reason I even got started in that is I wanted people who had frames that weren't Glocks to actually be able to feel good about what they were printing and really make it a piece of art. Just because if you can't afford a Glock, prior to me making those stipples available, people couldn't get those cool textures on anything else, and they'd have to resort to just goon tape or whatever. And I'm not just doing my designs. Like I'm actually working on some other stuff that was released strangely enough by FMDA a while back. That I'm starting to do some stippling on those just to experiment. I might come up with some other stipple packs for some other developers' things. But fact is, Chairman likes to work on his Glocks, and hey, that's great. He makes those things. Just the ergos alone that he does, which I don't think people appreciate enough, are honestly what I think are the best part of his frames. Just figuring out where you can cut things out without walls getting too thin, and being able to print stuff that you can't do through injection molding. So, I appreciate that he does that. But for me, I want to make stuff that looks cool, that can also be grabbed easily, that people actually feel good about printing. I want people to be able to be proud of the things that they make, even if it's for something for self-defense. Having the same textures you can get on a Glock, on a Taurus or a Smith & Wesson, or whatever it happens to be, I think is something that helps, bring our community overall to the next level. Because it's not just about Glocks. They just happen to, have a huge aftermarket, so they're conducive to printing. But they can also get a little bit boring. People might argue with me on that. So it's nice for other people to have options.
I can tell you right now, not in this show. I'm 100% on your damn side on that one. But yeah, no, that is. I mean, I remember I spoke to Chairman specifically. Let me first actually address this a little bit quick. No, yeah, range toys are designed for people to bring people that had no attention to 3D print. Yeah, no, that's me. That's literally me.
Oh, yeah.
No, yeah, that's literally me. Yeah.
It sort of brings normies into the fold, and I fully appreciate that. But there's people that do this out of desperation, not necessarily because they think it's a cool hobby. So there's a lot of different sides to this, and it's kind of hard through the rose-colored glasses we have to really be able to try to see all the viewpoints. At least that's the way I look at it.
No,
but I fully appreciate.
That's why I wanted you to at least explain your side of it, too, or at least what your. I think it's nice to have why developers are, what they're designing and why they're doing it for. I mean, I don't shy away from it. The thing that got me in was it was Ivan's weird Walther PPK, which, if you know what the 3011 looks like, imagine that but jankier. That was what he had, and I thought that was the dumbest thing ever, and I wanted to make it.
I loved that, and I'm actually working on some ideas for things that have retained barrels, sort of like the Walter or like the Makarov, things like that. I've got some ideas. Problem is actually getting parts kits to be able to try making some of those things actually work. I may also have to invest in a 5-axis CNC so I can actually do some prototyping without having to have these things shipped out and milled or shape waste or whatever.
I mean, I also do want to address this one thing too, because I think I've spoken to Chairman about it, but his thing was with the Glock stuff is, well, he's like, I mean, for me, it was more of no one else, or I know for a fact there'll be Glock frames, so people use my frame or Glock frames, so like I'll do Glock stuff because that's why. Like that was, I mean, it's I mean, that's a perfectly acceptable reason. I mean, that's why some people do AR-15 stuff because, I mean, yeah, no, people AR-15s, they're everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, really, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants here. I don't care if it's, me or Ivan or anybody else. The fact is, all of us are building on what came before us. For Chairman One, he's building on top of, most of the time the FMDA frames, and he's done incredible things with those to make them, honestly superior, I think, to factory clocks in terms of ergonomics. Which is something that the community previously didn't really have because we didn't have someone who knew industrial design working on clock frames. Or I mean, we all have slightly different things that we're doing, but the fact is, this is massive distributed iterative design, and I don't know. I just try to have a healthy sense of humor about it, just because all the work I did on the FOSS Cannon, like the 3D printed G2C PT111 thing. That was originally his frame, and then I went and I remixed it, made it work for a lot of other stuff. Then like the Fannyblaster, and was more or less from scratch because of how different it was, a single stack. But we're all building off the shoulders of giants here, even if those giants don't happen to be developing much these days. So I just try to keep a good sense of humor, about it when people come out with like remixes or building on top of other people's designs, just because that's really where the legacy is long term.
No, yeah, I see right now we're at 1 hour and 56. I'm gonna try to keep it under 2 hours. Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it under 2 hours specifically, just so I can also upload this immediately to Odyssey, BitChute, and all the other places too, without any other fun stuff. But I guess let's wrap it up here. If anything, if anyone has any questions right now, now's the time to do it. But I guess, I mean, yeah, I enjoy talking about this stuff. I like talking to developers specifically because I think a lot of people should hear or at least what goes into developing things. Or at least what are some cool other frames that are coming out too? Because it's hard to keep track of everything and where things are heading. And I like it. This is a frame I like a lot. I like the 1911. I think this is fantastic, and I want to, of course, I want to show people that this is awesome. I want people to get hyped up for this. But
yeah,
I'll let you say whatever you want for the last couple of minutes. I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well,
go ahead and preach. Whatever you need to do.
Yeah, well, I've already said, most of, what I was planning to. I just, I hope that, if people get discouraged just because, sort of returning to one of the previous thoughts, the idea that multiple people could be working on multiple ideas or, frames all at the same time, it's just, I hate to see someone get discouraged or, decide to even, not participate in the community anymore just because they happen to be working on something and thought that they were trying to be undermined or something like that. We all are, working on similar ideas, especially Like, if we see cheap parts kits and we all have similar ideas, we sometimes take very different approaches to actually implementing them. So, not to say necessarily everyone wants to collaborate all the time, but having multiple versions of a given frame, and having which might in some cases have different levels of durability or different levels of skill to put them together, there's no harm in having more well-tested options. But I hope that going forward, people put an emphasis really on getting a round count up and actually making something sure that for a beta, for example, something works 100% and it is durable to a level that they can feel comfortable putting it in someone else's hands. Like for me, my wife is the reason that I got into shooting in the first place. She taught me how to shoot. She taught me how to fish, and she field dresses my deer. So that's something that I really appreciate because it's not my favorite thing to do. But if bottom line, if I'm developing a frame, whether that's a 1911 or a Taurus or whatever, if I don't feel comfortable then taking that frame and handing it to my wife to shoot it, that's not something I would give a beta tester either. It's something that I want to feel comfortable that if there's someone that I care about that actually wants to test it and shoot it, that's something I feel good about, giving to them, not just some person on the internet who wants to be able to test some of this stuff to further the signals. But I think that's where I'll leave it off for now.
Yeah, no, okay. Let me just go ahead and read the Jez is like $2 of pesos, 4 pounds of dry beans coming from the lands of Sino our cartel. Keep up the Lord's work, my guys. I hope one day I can join you developing. Well, gladly. And
I hope so.
Yeah, all right. And I guess if anyone, later today we'll be talking about the JSD stuff, JSD, and then the Mom's Demand or Autoseer stuff that I guess is popping around. We'll have RK Spookware, Spooky Dev as well, and then we'll have a fun guest who is you may know him from a lot of the Boogaloo stuff, in fact. But
I didn't know we could use that word anymore.
It hit 2 hours right now, so I think we're okay to say that now. But that was hopefully that just was able to just get that just at the right cutoff for that. You can cut off the intro to upload it later. But yeah, that's some. Oh, Jim is streaming. Oh well, crap. All right, that's gonna. Well, crap. All right, that's gonna take away a lot of it. Did not know Medicare was gonna stream today, but. Well, all right. I guess I'll keep that one up then. If anyone wants to watch it afterwards. But yeah, yes, that's kind of it. I guess I'm gonna look at any last couple of questions. Let me see. Yeah, I had no idea if P80 I had no idea if Freeman was married. Respect. Oh yeah, she sounds like a keeper. Good job. Ken's counseling couch. Anyone have any good recommendations for good Fusion or 360 tutorials? You want to take care of that?
I've yet to find one that was actually good enough to purposely recommend. I think I said it on Twitter. I'll say it again. If you want to learn Fusion and there's just something you can't quite figure out, basically figure out the exact thing that's giving you trouble, and then try using a search engine to figure out exactly how it is that you fix that problem. Just because if you're trying to learn Fusion without a goal in mind of something that you actually want to make or envision. I just feel like, the tools, like whether that's Fusion or SolidWorks, they're so user unfriendly that, that's the only motivation I could find to actually learn how to use them properly.
All right. And okay, one other one. Ron Bear, what do you think of the stuff coming out of the Black Lotus group? I'm trying to remember the Black Lotus group. If you want to go ahead and answer that, go ahead.
Oh, about Black Lotus group, you know what? I think that we're all trying to do the same thing here, whether that we just have different ways of doing it. I think that, they come up with some interesting stuff. I don't really know much about how they go about testing some of their designs or what that looks like. But I think that frankly, as a community, we could do better at documenting what our testing practices look like. So I know I'd like to work with people collaboratively across groups to come up with standards for actually like how do we run betas? What standards are good enough? If anyone wants to actually work with me on that, I'm sure you know how to get a hold of me. But I've seen some really cool stuff that they're working on, and they have some talented devs. I would love to know more about their testing process, how many rounds they put through something before they sort of call it good enough for a release. Those are the only things that really concern me. But I've talked to Gage a couple times. He seems nice enough. And really, they're just they're doing, it seems like, some more from scratch stuff than I know I've messed around with. So it's just sort of different niches within the community is what it looks like to me. But just if you're going to be printing something of a design that you haven't seen before, always take it with a grain of salt. I don't care if that's something from me or from anyone else. Always take safety precautions if something doesn't smell quite right or if something looks like it may not hold up. Just your gut is a good thing to listen to.
Okay, and let me go look at a couple other things. Yeah, I see Tech Guns in the is also in the chat. I was gonna probably say this a little bit more for the next stream later today, but I might as well mention it too now that I know, because I guess Jim's stream is gonna be happening, so maybe not as many people will watch it. Yeah, I know he got his channel basically struck for some of the most ridiculous crap too. He got in trouble for intending to sell or trying to promote the sell of guns or something with like an FGC9 mag dump and then apparently something else.
Wait, whose channel was that?
It's Tech Guns. He's a smaller channel, but he's helped me out a bit, or met him earlier on. But yeah, no, he got his channel basically. He got 2 strikes on him, and then instantly got denied for trying to sell or basically trying to promote the sale of guns, which is an actual rule that YouTube has that hasn't really been enforced. But I guess we're probably going to start seeing that one coming up a little bit soon. Now, if you're upset by that, if anyone doesn't like that, or you can, I think, he's in the chat right now. If you can go ahead, I'm not sure if you can still click on people's accounts and then go to their channel, but probably YouTube hasn't responded to him. I mean, the only way I got my channel taken back or got my strikes removed was by harassing the YouTube Twitter account. So like they denied me every single time usually. And then if you go to Twitter, they'll usually, you just have to harass them enough, then they'll eventually redo it. But
sometimes, I mean, YouTube is like I don't know, they're like the biggest guy in town. So I know a lot of people are reluctant to want to use, Odyssey or other platforms more exclusively. So I mean, it's just unfortunate that they write the rules and can sort of enforce them how they want. But I don't know. Regardless of what platform you use, though, I think most people know that I'm on. I have some reasons. But whatever platform you're doing, wherever you happen to be, just I'll say, use good OPSEC. Like if you truly don't care and are doing everything above board, people can still ruin your life even if you're following all the laws. Especially, I mean, just take a look at Everytown.
Yeah.
I think whatever God is up there, every day for just that choice that I made to sort of stay like that when I first joined the community. Otherwise, things might be very, very different if they could have, if I used my face.
Oh, no, that's for the stream later tonight. Don't worry. Hopefully JSG doesn't get a little mad when when the NBC part comes in. But it's that's for the stream later tonight. Let me go read this. Let me go read the Griff chat here. Thank you, Kiowa. I wish they did more visual remixes. I love their stuff, but I'm always scared of the stuff like the Harlot. 100% string pull first. Well, I can't. I haven't shot one of those yet, so I couldn't. I don't know yet.
I don't want to comment too much just because I haven't built one. I mean, I would guess, headspace. If it doesn't headspace properly or if it's a little bit sus, honestly, I would say if it's something that's a home build 100%, even if it's with a parts kit someone's supplying, if you're uncomfortable with it, there's no harm in string testing it. I mean, I've gotten to a point with my designing that I feel more comfortable just shooting it off the hand because, I don't know, not to say I've gotten good enough, but I at least trust myself to make some of those design decisions and know when something looks fairly safe. But if you don't know and you don't have a litmus test for that, there's no harm in taking a little bit more caution.
Yeah, I think I might start uploading more of my first shots just to see how people, because I think people might find it funny of like how long it takes. The progressively like changing, like, okay, this one took me 4 minutes to shoot. This one took me 3. This one took me 2. Okay, well, this frame I kind of just went for it. I'm getting better at it now, but yeah, I'm not I mean, I'm trying Ivan's frame, so I trust him well enough. But yeah, we could probably just, or we should probably, we can do this again some other time, gladly.
Yeah, we can get chatting. I like chatting with you. We can get back together and talk about some other stuff some other time. But yeah, you gotta refuel and get ready for the next one.
I need to get some. I need to eat something before that stream starts. But yep, it was a pleasure to have you on. I'm really glad we got to talk about this. I had fun. I'm glad we also kind of we beat the crumb stream a couple of times too. So I'm glad that happened. But I think I'm looking forward to this. I'm glad now I can finally start showing the 1911 now. But
oh yeah, no. The only thing that I ask, I mean, I think all the beta testers already know it. Let's just try to keep the top on. We don't want to let all the secrets out until it's fully released and then it's ready for people to remix. But just keep the slide on. Post pics to social media if you want to post shooting video. I think we'd only all benefit from seeing that.
Right. Yeah.
I know definitely be posting my 10mm testing when I get to that point.
Well, yeah. And you know what? I guess the way I'll end the stream is a good way to promote the next stream later today is reading Ken's counseling couch. Yeah, OBSEC. I got fired from my last job for discussing a public custody case about people who weren't my clients because certain people didn't want me to talk about it. Yeah, no, OBSEC is a really important thing, and I'm really looking forward to talking about that one, especially.
That might be an interesting talk. Like, I won't give away all my secrets, but I can at least talk about things that you can do to help keep yourself, a little bit safer from, things like special interest groups.
Well,
or at least seems to work for me. But that's a topic for another day.
I mean, yeah. We'll. I mean, depending on how long this. That's the thing. I don't know how long the stream will go later tonight. But if it does, we might throw out a link if we go a little too deep into that one. That'd be fun. But either way, 8 p.m. CST. Okay, what is the time now? Okay, it's 5:40. Okay. 6, 7, 8. Okay, 3 hours from now. So yeah, 3 hours, and we'll be streaming later today. And hopefully, see you guys there. Thanks for coming on. I'm glad we did this, and we'll have to do it again later. All right.
Yeah, likewise. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks.
Well, I guess see you guys later today.
Yeah, see y'all.
And